applies just kind of in general. So a lot of times you're told when you're steering to just put pressure on one side, okay? That sort of works, but the problem that you run into is twofold. First one, it's hard to tell like exactly how to do that. The second thing is that when you put pressure on one side, and so I pull hard with port side, for instance, the finish looks like this, right? So the starboard oar doesn't get as far because you've pushed harder with this side, and so you have this really awkward finish where you have one oar that's not all the way into your body, and the other oar is all the way into your body, or you have to pull through, and it's a mess. So when we are trying to steer and put pressure on one side or the other, what we're going to do instead is we're not going to reach out as far to that side, to the opposite side, okay? So what's going to happen, so let's say that I want to put on starboard pressure, right? I will come up to the stroke and then stop my right blade a little early. You can see that this arm is a little bent, this one is straight. Now what happens here is when I apply pressure, I'm going to apply pressure together, hands come together, the finish is together. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's a little bit weird when you're doing it for the first time, but it's really effective in terms of actually how to turn the boat, okay? So again, what we're gonna do is instead of trying to put pressure on one side, we're gonna shorten up the other side so that we're having a shorter stroke on that side. Does that make sense to everyone? Mm-hmm. Cool. Now what that's going to do is it's going to mean that the catches and the finishes are together, and particularly the finish is in the same spot you would normally have it. You don't have this weird crossed hands thing going on, okay? So when you're thinking about steering, think about coming up, keeping one arm bent a little bit, put those blades in. When you apply pressure, the hands will naturally come together and you'll have a good strong finish, okay? Now, when we are thinking about steering, the most important concept there is the concept of point, okay? And so what that means is once you have the boat in the direction that you want it to go, so your bow person says, yes, this is where we want it, this is a good point, look behind you, okay? And find something way in the distance, like those, I don't know, that bridge abutment or something like that, the railroad bridge. And keep the stern of the boat lined up with that, okay? Now, what that means is that you can make small adjustments every stroke with just applying just a smidge more pressure on one side or the other, instead of large adjustments every once in a while. So if you are constantly keeping the stern of the boat on that bridge abutment, you are going straight. Like that's the only option there is, because you always have that same line that you're going through. So the bow person could say, yes, this is a good point, look behind you, and then try to keep the stern of the boat, so the part of the boat that's in front of you, in line with something way in the distance. That'll allow you to stay in a straight line. And then if they need to make an adjustment, they can say, okay, let's put some pressure on one side or the other, whatever it happens to be. But it's really important that you try to maintain that straight line at all times if they are not making an adjustment. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? Yes?
So how would you control that? Say you put pressure before
For the point or for the pressure?
for the pressure.
So you would say 2 strokes of port pressure and then 1, 2, whatever that happens to you. When you're in bow, you got to be turning around all the time, and we'll be there to help you with this, so it's not a big deal. But you make sure that you tell them how many strokes to do it, and then just whether you want port or starboard pressure. You don't need to say into port pressure. It's something that you want to happen immediately. So usually I tend to say it at the finish beforehand, so they have plenty of time in order to get up to the catch and take the next stroke. But just port pressure for 2 strokes, 1, 2, and you're done with that. Okay? Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yes, Brad.
Can you repeat it to me? The side that you shorten
is the side that you're going to go towards.
The side you're going to go towards.
Yes.
So if I'm stroking, I have a shorter port stroke, I'm going to go to port.
Yes,
So
because
same
you have a
side,
stronger
same
starboard
direction.
stroke.
Okay.
So it's going to kind of point the boat in the direction of the shorter arm. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. So drill for today is going to be pause at arms and body over. Okay? What this is going to look like, you'll come through, take the stroke. We have that micro pause at the finish. Hands come away. You're going to pause here. Okay? We should feel a little tension in the hamstrings, not too much. You don't need to really go for it. We want to keep that chest up, and we want to keep the lower back nice and tight. The whole goal of this is twofold. First one, we're trying to make sure that we're loading up the glutes and the hamstrings so that when you actually apply power, you can use those muscles when you're applying power. The second one is to put the lower back in a strong position so you can take the load, right? If you have your lower back all crunched up like this, when you try to apply pressure, it's going to put a lot of pressure on your lumbar spine, and we don't want to do that, okay? It's just asking for injury. So when we do this drill, you're going to come through, micro pause at the finish, hands away, body over. We'll pause here. Call will be row. You'll come up and take the stroke. Okay. Again, in the quad, that's 2C's job is to call that. Okay. So you'll be calling, we'll start the drill in 2, 1, 2, and then row each time that we go through, switching the pairs. Bow, your job is to steer. Cool. We all good with that? Okay, let's get going. It looks like we've got a 6 instead of an 8 today.